Hello. Okay, so you'll remember from last week that I looked at the problems that some deaf people feel, how they might get frustrated. I want to look at something slightly different today, but it is in relation to something I've talked about recently around using interpreters. It's such a key thing to look at, and so I want to give you that today. When you meet with a deaf person and you're communicating with them through an interpreter, this is quite a sensitive issue. But at the end of that conversation that you have with them, what we find is many hearing people will approach the interpreter just to find out of pure intrigue, how they learned to sign and how they developed those skills, how they became an interpreter. But as a result, the deaf person gets sidelined, and that's happened to me. I've chatted with someone, and the interpreter's gone off to the toilet, say, or to get a drink, and I've then gone to look for the interpreter because I need the interpreter, and I find them talking with the person that I've been speaking to. Now, I'll step in and say, "Oh, what's being said here?" And the interpreter will say, "Well, naturally they're just asking how I learned sign language or how I became an interpreter." And I say, "Well, okay, um, but." And obviously, for hearing people, they don't know they're doing anything wrong. They're just amazed at this thing called sign language. And so, but what people need to take real care about this because it's about showing deaf people respect. The interpreter is there to provide interpretation. So, a simple example of this would be, say you had a two hearing people. Say one was a British Prime Minister and one was the Japanese Prime Minister. You then had an interpreter translating from Japanese into English and English into Japanese. At the end of that interaction, you wouldn't find people approaching that interpreter. They would do their job and they would leave. Or, at the very least, they would continue to do their work and that would be then done. People wouldn't be asking them questions. And so it should be the same with sign language interpreters. But the problem is, it's sign language, it's a visual language, and as opposed to a spoken language. Now, this is what causes such intrigue, and I think that's why hearing people then approach the interpreter to ask them questions around sign language, but not the deaf person. Why not approach the deaf person and ask them about sign language? Because they might say, I grew up in a deaf family, or I grew up with hearing parents, but I attended a school where I learned sign language, and be able to get some of the story around that. And you can ask them about the interpreter. How would they have learned to sign? And we would be able to explain, well, they would have done a level 1 to level 6 and done an interpreting module and then gone on to do an interpreting course and something like that. Now, that means the deaf person's then included. They're not sidelined. Now, this is quite a sensitive issue, but I often find this happens. And to be honest, I feel humiliated at that moment that this conversation's happening away from me when this is my first language. Sign language is my first language. But a lot of hearing people won't appreciate this. But we just need to be really careful about how you use an interpreter and engage with an interpreter. This isn't easy. But I'm hoping that the information that I'm presenting today just gives you food for thought. That if you were to meet a deaf person, how you might just take care around this. Because deaf people are often sidelined, like I said, and this has gone on for years. And this is a result of oralism, the fact that we're in a very hearing dominated world and spoken world. And so this is about fairness for both sides. And so thank you for watching. And if you are interested in this and you want some more information, feel free to make contact. Thank you. Farewell.